our new criteria for the file score, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So hopefully everybody can see that PowerPoint. Is that indeed what's coming across? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Antara. Okay, all right, so I am Kit Mosner from the Department of Physician Assistant Studies at Idaho State University, and I've got all the hot tips and tricks that your heart desires for navigating our particular application process. I also have with me Callie Valentine, who is our admissions director, as well as Dave Martin, our academic coordinator, and Tara Smith, who is our clinical coordinator. And then I also have three very special students who agreed to attend with me: Bria Gillespie, Andrea Jones, and Judson Mead. So let's talk a little bit about the program. We are a 24-month program that awards a Master's of Physician Assistant Studies at the end of it. The first 12 months are the didactic portion, where you're in the classroom learning all the medicine, and then the second year is the clinical portion, where you get to go out into clinics and put all the knowledge to the test. So we accept 72 students each year, with 24 at our Pocatello location, 36 at our Meridian location, and 12 out in Caldwell at our College of Idaho campus through our partnership with them. That picture in the bottom corner is our Caldwell classroom, in case you were curious. But the real question, what should you expect while you're in the program? Good news, I have the answers. We are a high-tech, high-touch program, meaning that we use our technology in tandem with hands-on labs and activities throughout the didactic year to help you learn. There are 3 classrooms, and they're connected by distance learning technology that allows us to teach to all 3 sites simultaneously. And since we team teach all of our classes, there's never one particular site that always receives distantly delivered lectures. There's a chance for any lecture on any day at any time to be delivered from any one of our 3 campuses. Nearly all of our faculty are practicing PAs as well, and with their open door policies, they're around to help answer your questions anytime, even if they're not the course coordinator or weren't the one delivering the lecture. They bring their clinical experiences from across a wide variety of different fields to the classroom. And we also really love to bring in guest lecturers from the clinics throughout the state to help give their expertise on topics too. We have 3 technicians at each of our 3 classrooms to help make sure that the technology continues to run smoothly. And if there are any hiccups, you can bet that our team is on it and ready to fix it immediately to get you back into class. So there's no waiting for IT to come from somewhere else on campus to help us get it figured out. Our team is ready to go. Now, because we're such a short program with 24 months, we jam-pack 30 credits into each semester. They are fast-paced, but there's no competition once you're actually in the program. You're all going to be coworkers someday, so there's no real point in fighting with each other. So everybody is there to help each other out, and nothing's better than watching that particular family come together. The fall semester in the didactic year is pretty much routinely thought to be our hardest semester among our students. It's structured pretty similarly to how an undergraduate semester is laid out, in that you're taking all of these courses all at the same time through the semester, with each class assigned a certain time slot throughout the week. It is a heck of a lot all at once, but many of the biology portions are just an intense, more in-depth review to bring back what you learned in your undergrad to give you that good, solid foundation to build off of. I couldn't fit our classrooms on the other side, so Meridian is on the left-hand side and Pocatello is on the right-hand side, in case you wanted to see those classrooms. The spring and summer semesters are a hefty chunk of classes, but unlike the fall semester where you're taking all of those simultaneously, our spring and summer semesters are set up in a module system. So students will focus very intensely on one specific topic of medicine for their entire day of classes. And a module can last anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks. So they'll take the final for that module and move on to the next one. And of course, through it all, we have hands-on labs, clinical exam skill practices, interprofessional activities with all kinds of healthcare programs from across ISU, including nursing, pharmacy, dental hygiene, AT, OT, PT, and not to mention the DO students that are out at the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine as well. And from there, students head on into their clinical year. Now, Our clinical year team is one of our great strengths. They are super ready to secure students 8 rotations that are 5 weeks each, with 1 week in between for travel, end of rotation exams, and some other administrative type things in between. So while our highest concentration of sites is certainly in this upper Northwest area around us, like Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Utah, Montana, we've also got connections with sites out in other places like California and Arizona, Wyoming, Texas, Minnesota, Nebraska, Alaska, Hawaii, and all kinds of places in between. And of course, if you come into the program with a connection already interested in precepting for you, there'll be a time during your didactic year that you can bring that information to our clinical year team, and they'll do their best to set it up for you. You'll also be able to put in your preferences for rotations, and while we can't guarantee that you'll get everything you want, our optimization process does its best to match as many preferences as possible. I also want to touch on our medical Spanish opportunities, which I feel makes us particularly unique. And we think it is incredibly important to bring providers to those rural communities for whom English may not be their first language. We have been working with Dr. Kathleen Tarp over in the Spanish department to help build a graduate certificate in Spanish for the health professions. And for those interested, no matter their language level, they can apply for the certificate to complete alongside their PA program curriculum. It's composed of just 15 credits and was built to be able to be completed comfortably by our PA students. Only the first course, which is a Spanish medical terminology course, is in person. All the rest of them are online and geared to be as flexible as possible. And students can complete that certificate with just 1 extra 3-credit course per semester. So it's not particularly taxing. Students participating in that graduate certificate are also eligible for our Latino Health Track Scholarship, which gives students the chance to put their Spanish to use in rotations located in Latinx dense areas. So while there is an additional application to the graduate school in order to enroll in the graduate certificate, they're happy to take pretty much anybody. So if that is a hope for you to be able to pursue that, it is definitely available for our particular program. All right, but what's the point in talking about all of this when what you really want to know is, yeah, but how do I get in? So here are a few things that you need to have a complete application with us. We're going to talk about each one of these. The bachelor's degree needs to be from a US regionally accredited institution. We don't particularly care what subject it's in, just as long as it is from that US regionally accredited institution. And you need to have it completed by June 30th of the year that you would enter the program. So for example, if you're going to apply this upcoming cycle in, not this coming one, next year's, in 2022, then you would need to make sure that you had your degree finished by June 30th of 2023. Okay, next up is the prerequisite courses. There's a heck of a lot of stuff on here. They also need to be completed from a US regionally accredited institution. They need to be 10 years or younger, and you need to have a grade of C or better in them. We require microbiology, biochemistry, human anatomy, human physiology, statistics, and abnormal psychology. I've listed here the courses that are at BSU that meet our qualifications for you. So if you were having trouble finding those ones, these are it. Here are a couple of hot tips for you in regards to the prerequisite courses. Biochemistry needs to be a straight up biochemistry course. It cannot have the word organic in the title. So things like bioorganic chemistry or introduction to organic and biochemistry, those don't qualify. For the anatomy and physiology courses, depends on which institution you take them from, how they're offered. Sometimes they're offered as a single topic course where you have one class that is human anatomy, and then you have another class that is human physiology, or like at BSU and ISU, they're offered in a combined structure, human anatomy and physiology, and it's a whole sequence of combined courses, a 1 and a 2. Now, for our purposes, we cannot accept a prerequisite from a single topic course and combine it with a combined sequence course. So let's say, for example, somebody had a human anatomy course, and then they also had an A&P2 course. The way that those sequenced combined courses are set up, you study half the body in both anatomy and physiology in one part of the class, and the other half in the other part of the class. So if somebody had that human anatomy and then an A&P2 class, they'd be perfectly fine in their knowledge of human anatomy, but they'd only have studied half the body's physiology, and that's a problem. So you need to make sure that either you have both single topic courses or the entire sequence of a combined course. The third thing to keep an eye on is abnormal psychology. We do accept developmental psychology through the lifespan in place of abnormal psychology, but not every place offers developmental psychology as a course that covers the entirety of the lifespan. So you need to make sure that you check the course description to make sure it does cover the entirety of the lifespan. If it only covers part of the lifespan, you may have to combine it with another course in order to complete that life sequence. Like here I have listed child development, but also adolescent and adult development to complete the developmental route if you wanted to go that way. Or you could just take the single course of abnormal psychology, and that'd be just fine as well. The next thing that is required are GRE results. Now, there is no substitution here. It has to be the GRE. It cannot be the MCAT and it cannot be the PA-CAT for now. We just need the general test with the verbal and the quantitative sections, so no writing section is required, and it needs to be 10 years or younger if you have already taken it, or if you need to take it by November 1st of the year that you plan to submit the application. As long as we receive the results of that exam by January 1st, you have all the way up to October 31st to be able to take that test. For the application, you self-report the scores into CASPA and have the official report sent to the Idaho State University Graduate School with the school code that's noted there. You're also welcome to retake it. As long as you retake it by November 1st and we have the scores sent to us and have them by January 1st, we are more than happy to check and see if the retake winds up getting you a better score than the old attempt and replace them if that's the case. All right, next up is talking about the CASPA application itself. It's pretty straightforward. It usually opens toward the end of April with our submit by deadline is midnight Eastern time on November 1st. That's the thing that trips people up the most, is it is Eastern time because CASPA is working off of that particular time zone. So keep an eye out for that. The hottest of hot tips here, we have to be able to see your plans for any outstanding prerequisites. So if you have not taken one of those prerequisites we talked about when you submit your application, you still need to list that planned coursework on your CASPA electronic transcript so that we can see that you know you still need to do it and that you have a plan to complete it. Next up is the graduate school application itself. It needs to be submitted by November 1st, but this one, because it's Idaho State University, is operating on mountain time. So honestly, really, it's just best if you submit all your application materials before the sun goes down on November 1st, and then you won't have to worry about time zones for any of that garbage. So the graduate school application is a lot less intensive than the CASPA application, but it is required. Now, the graduate school application is going to ask for transcripts as well. They're needed for CASPA, but they're also needed for the graduate school application because those two systems do not share documents. So we cannot grab your transcripts off your CASPA application and use them for your graduate school application. You can submit unofficial transcripts when you apply, but you need to still have official transcripts submitted if you're going to be accepted. Okay. We also require 3 letters of recommendation. CASPA will let you request up to 5 of those, but we do not guarantee that all 5 of those are going to be read, nor do we guarantee which of those will be read of the 3 that we require. So make sure that you're requesting good ones and not just ones to fill up the slots. We don't have a requirement for who they're from, just that they're not from a family member or a spiritual leader. All right, that's nice. So that's the required materials for it, but let's talk about what the application cycle actually looks like. CASPA will open at the end of April, and we will review all the applications that we receive as they're verified and let you know if there are any materials that you're missing. It's great to get your application in over the summer so that if you are missing anything, we can let you know and you have time to correct it before that November 1st deadline passes. Okay, but here's a hot tip that vaguely contradicts that. If you have any prerequisite coursework that you are completing over that summer semester, you will save yourself a lot of extra effort if you just wait to submit your application until those summer grades are received. It's a pain in the butt to have to go back and continue to update things after you've submitted the application. So if you do have those summer prereqs in progress, just wait a little bit. It's not going to hurt your application to wait until those are received. Interviews run from October through February, and in the meantime, the application deadline will pass on November 1st. At that time, any summer or fall grades are going to be due at January 1st. And if you have any outstanding prerequisites that you are going to complete in spring semester, they must be present and visible on your CASPA electronic transcript by then as well. On this timeline, it does note that March, the remaining seats are offered. During interviews from October through February, we like to try to offer about 2/3 of our seats as early seat offers. So this is talking about all that 1/3 of seats that are still available at the end of interviews, which we offer at that time. The next 35 are placed on an alternate list. In June, before beginning the program, final degrees are due, as well as grades from any spring prerequisites. And then the program usually starts in the 3rd week of August, right along with the university's fall semester, with a few days of orientation the week before. But let's go back and talk about applications again real quick. So what do we do with it once it's verified? That's a big thing. It has to get verified by CASPA before we will take a look at it. So once it's verified, we'll check to make sure it's complete, that all your prereqs are accounted for, that your graduate school application is submitted, that you have all your letters of recommendation and all those things that we already talked about. If something's missing, we'll let you know. And then we will calculate a file score. If it meets a certain threshold that we've set, it'll move on for a second review by admissions committee members. And those folks are going to look over the whole application, read the personal statement and the letters of recommendation. They're going to review the academic trends over time and examine your experiences more closely. And they will make a recommendation on whether to invite you for an interview or not. If the application's file score does not quite meet our threshold of the moment, it'll get put into our on hold bucket. We try to complete about 150 interviews for our 72 seats each year. So as we receive applications and can evaluate the trends of how folks are scoring with their file scores, the admissions director will set a file score threshold, and it's usually set pretty dang high at the beginning of a cycle. And as things progress, the threshold will continue to get re-examined, and it'll lower as we see that there's a need to review more applications for interviews in order to achieve that 150 interview goal. So even if an application gets put into the on hold tag to begin with, it's possible that later in the cycle, the threshold will lower to meet their file score, and they'll move on for that second review at that time. Now, the file score threshold is a hard line once it finalizes. Either you meet it or beat it or not. So even if your application is a 9.79, if the threshold is a 9.8, you will remain on hold. Okay, I've been talking a lot about file scores. So what is it? Okay, so we initially rank applications as we receive them. And so since we have more than 700 applications that we're looking at, we have to start somewhere, and the file score looks at certain criteria and awards points to create a ranking for each application that we receive. The old file score system used to only take the prerequisite GPA and the GRE percentile scores into account. But we just recently released this new list of criteria, and there are all sorts of combinations that an applicant could receive points through. You'll notice that the prerequisite GPA and GRE score percentile scores are still included, but the GRE in particular weighs a heck of a lot less than it used to, and we're now looking at a bunch of other things as well. You can find all these definitions on our website, but I'll go through them a little bit here as well. So the first option is your prerequisite GPA. That is just a straight number, and it is only calculated using the 6 prerequisite courses that I listed previously. It's not cumulative, okay? Just the prerequisites. The next way is through those GRE verbal and quantitative percentiles. We're not using the raw scores, we are specifically using the percentile scores. It's going to be calculated by a certain amount to create the points that get awarded for each of those 2 sections. You can also gain points for having a military service background. This is for active duty, reservists, and veterans. Dependent status does not qualify in this particular setup. Rural background is another option, which is awarded to folks who are able to respond to CASPA's question regarding childhood residency as an area with a population of less than 50,000. And then the overall science GPA is also going to be multiplied by a certain amount, and those points added to a file score as well. Now, this next one is our most complicated one, so hang in there. You can also gain some points by your experiences that you list in CASPA. CASPA's Help Center is your best friend for figuring out where your particular experiences lie in terms of the category that it falls under. So if you have questions about that kind of thing, feel free to go check out the Help Center for those definitions. And remember, these are not required, but they help, and points are not prorated. They are not partially awarded. Either you have the certain amount of hours for each category and you receive the points, or you don't, and you don't get points for that category. So you can get some points for combined patient and healthcare experience, volunteerism and community service, shadowing, at least some of which should be with a PA, as well as hours of employment and leadership opportunities. Next way you can receive points is through non-English language proficiency. That is any non-English language, including sign language, if you have intermediate, advanced, or native proficiency in it on your CASPA application, you will receive some of those points. And then finally, collegiate activities and sports. This is intercollegiate activities and sports. It is not intramural or club activities or sports. They need to be intercollegiate versions of those. And so you can get points based off of that. All right, now, okay, this looks like a lot. Here's what 2 real applicants from a couple of years ago looked like in terms of scores with this new system. In the end, even though they scored points in different ways, they have pretty similar file scores. And that's the hope with this. There's no one way for a successful application to look. There's a wide variety to get points. And it means that folks from all kinds of backgrounds have a chance in the process to receive similar scores. We do not expect that every applicant is going to receive every single point. And actually, we're hoping that they probably don't, because that would be a lot. We're hoping that this helps alleviate some of the pressure that things like the GRE had in our previous system. Is it complicated to look at? For sure, but this is all on our website, so you can always go in and self-calculate to see how you're doing. And since this is just rolling out for this upcoming cycle that opens in April, we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like in terms of a competitive score, but we're expecting it may be a little bit lower than what we are seeing at the moment, which is fine. My last thing to talk about here, what does it mean for you? The takeaway here is that as an applicant, you just need to do your best. You know what your schedule looks like, what your life allows for, and what your budget has room for. And our criteria for scoring points is always available. So you know how you can maximize your opportunities to raise your own file score as high as you can. You want your score to be high enough to meet our threshold for that year. And since the threshold depends on the applications that we're receiving each cycle, that's the one thing that we can't predict. So do your best to score as highly as you can with these new criteria, and it'll look a little bit different for everyone, and that's a good thing. One last thing to leave on, don't expect that you will know everything, and we don't expect that from you either. So you don't have to be lost in the dark about it. Give us a call, send us an email. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So let's talk.
Does anybody have any questions for the IHGPA program folks in terms of the application process or the program itself? We've got some great people here to answer those questions.
I did
I'll
have
give you guys a few minutes. Go ahead.
for the employment section, is there a timeline on that, or is that just like your total employment?
CASPA will let you put in as much information and data as you want. So if you want to go back 40 years, you theoretically could. So that is as much effort as you want to put into it.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Any other ones?
I have one. Is there any recommendations you would have for finding shadowing opportunities, especially right now with the pandemic?
Hey, Dave and Antara, you want to answer that?
The
Sorry,
question was about
unmuted.
shadowing.
I would suggest a couple of things. One is I know that the local hospitals, St. Luke's in particular, has just opened up their shadowing experiences since COVID has, I guess, improved in their hospital system. So they have had some pre-PA, pre-med students shadowing. So you can contact student services at St. Luke's. Another option, and this is obviously dependent somewhat upon your schedule and the rest of your life, but being a scribe at the emergency departments, at least in the Treasure Valley, has really become a benefit and really allowed students to come in, I think, with a little bit of a heads up and previous experience. So that would be the other thing I would do, is check out the possibility of working as a scribe within health systems.
This is Dave. So from my standpoint, COVID really did put a negative impact on shadowing, though it's opening up some. If you know a doctor, like you have a doctor that you go to or a clinic, you might contact the clinic, maybe contact the clinic manager and see, hey, could I come shadow? And they could get you in with some different folks in a clinic. Maybe you know somebody that works at a clinic and they could put in a good word for you. I know at the clinic I work at, the office manager has asked me before, hey, would it be okay if this person shadows you? I was like, sure, no problem. And so that's been a common door for people to get in, is through the clinic manager. If you know somebody or know somebody that knows somebody, sometimes that can be challenging to get shadowing.
Especially over here, I think in the Treasure Valley, because a lot of the health systems have, where it used to be I could call somebody up that I knew and I went and shadowed. Now they've asked them to go through their student services. They may need COVID training, they need HIPAA training, whatever it may be. And so I would really encourage you, if it's a provider that's within St. Al's, St. Luke's, Salter, that you make sure to go through their student services and figure out what has to be done in order to shadow.
We
Olga,
have
you
some
had a-
PA students here with us, and they had to go through this. And so I see Bria here and the others are not on video. Do you guys have any hot tips on how to dig up shadowing experience?
Yeah, so I most of my shadowing experience came through like a really big hospital in Missoula, Montana, and I guess I kind of approached it from two different directions. I had like a family friend connection that I asked to put me in contact with their head of shadowing student services, because that way I kind of had like that personal foot in the door of a really big organization. The other shadowing that I did was at a much smaller clinic, and that was, I mean, kind of a combination of what everyone has said. I knew a provider there and just called, and the woman that was working the front desk was like, oh yeah, like I'll make a note and talk to so and so and see if we can get you in. One thing that I have learned throughout this whole process is like, don't be afraid to call and just ask. Like the worst thing that could happen is someone says like, hey, we can't make that happen. But I feel like the benefit of them potentially saying yes totally outweighs whatever like embarrassment or like flushing you might feel in your face over the phone if they do happen to say no. I only had one hospital say that they wouldn't take me as a shadow, and that was just because the way that their like hospital system is set up, you have to be like in school as a student in that profession in order to work with their providers. But one out of a couple isn't too bad.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate all the knowledge you guys shared.
Olga, you said you had your hand up.
So we'll get students who may have struggled a little bit in the beginning in those early prereqs, and then they might be doing considerably better later on in their prereqs. But questions that students often ask us is, do I need to repeat versus taking more advanced courses? So given that Anat and Phys, for example, are the prereqs, what happens if a student doesn't repeat those, but does an advanced physiology and anatomy course instead?
If they take an advanced and they complete the sequence, as I talked about, then we would be happy to use the grades from the advanced courses. We will use whichever course qualifies that has the best grade. We do not combine or average out grades. We'll just straight up replace it.
Thank you.
Haley, you also had your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering if Idaho State accepts virtual shadowing hours by chance.
Especially right now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
How do you guys feel about informational interviews if they can't get an actual physical virtual shadow?
We are accepting those right now as well. Since COVID has kind of thrown things up in the air.
Well, I think we're trying to encourage ingenious ideas, right? And you have up. Ben Tolomeo, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a quick question.
Right.
What entry-level healthcare jobs do you see a lot of your students applying with or getting experience through?
Yeah, it's all over the map. And Tara mentioned scribes. We're seeing more and more of those folks that scribe in a clinic or especially ER. Lab people, they decide, you know, I really want to go further than lab, and so they come in as a PA. X-ray techs, not an uncommon thing we'll see. A lot of people have a CNA background, MA background, medical assistant. We see a lot of those people. So it's pretty much all over the map. And we have plenty of people that apply that have not worked in healthcare. They've done some shadowing, but they've not had a job in medicine. Many people have taken EMS courses. Some worked actively with EMS, you know, emergency medical services and ambulance. And they took the course and maybe never worked on an ambulance, but they have that course as a background. But it's not required in our program that you absolutely have to have a medical job or background.
Haley, did you have your hand up again for a second question?
I do. So theoretically, like if say I finish my bachelor's in December and applications opened up April, would that year after all of that, like the GRE, the interviews, all that stuff, would you start PA school that August, or would you have to wait another cycle?
So I'm going to use theoretical dates here. Let's say, for example, you are going to complete your bachelor's degree December of 2021. Let's just say that. Our cycle is going to open this April 2021, and the submission deadline is going to be November 1st of 2021, and interviews will conclude in February of 2022, and the program would start in August of 2022. If you were going to complete your degree in December of 2021, you can apply for that cycle. The degree just needs to be completed by June 30th of 2022, the year you would actually start the program. Does that clarify?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
Kit, Dave here. How for applicants that have courses in progress as they're applying, there's a limit that we have, right, for how many
Yeah,
courses in progress?
Yeah, we need to have 4 of the prerequisite courses completed by the end of the calendar year. You can have up to 2 prerequisites in progress in that spring semester before you start the program.
Ben, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I guess I need to lower my hand.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure. Does anybody else have some great questions? Especially, I think if it's okay, if we've asked the questions of the application process, let's talk a little bit about the profession of PA and maybe even talk to some of the students. What kinds of questions do you guys have about the ISU program and how it works? You can chat it or you can speak verbally.
I also had one more question regarding that though. So I would love to go to ISU. That is actually my dream school, my number one. So, see you in a few years, hopefully. But so I know you guys have Pocatello, Caldwell, and Meridian. When you interview, do you get to, are you able to get accepted to either one of those, or does say Pocatello and Meridian only offer PA program stuff, or is it all of them?
We're all one big program that offers exactly the same thing across all 3 sites. So if you are extended an interview invitation, you'll get access to the campus preferences survey, where you'll get to put in your preference. You'll list your first, second, and third preference in terms of campus locations for where you would like to attend. If you receive an early seat offer during the interviews, you are more likely to get your first option, your first preference. But then when we're extending seat offers, we do our best to try to match your seat offer to your preferences.
Okay, thank you so much.
Could either one of the students or the faculty talk a little bit about what it's like in the second year? Are you traveling? Are you staying in place? Is everything done in Meridian or everything done in Pocatello?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So in terms of your second year, as Kit mentioned, you have 8 rotations and they're 5 weeks in length. And our policy is that students will have to travel. Sometimes, luck of the draw, somebody does not have to travel, but in general, students should plan to travel. And I would say, different from that academic year, clinical year, I think the stress comes from not necessarily even traveling, but moving to a new clinical site almost every rotation, if not every rotation. So 5 weeks becomes a very short period of time, and students just start to feel comfortable, and then poof, off you go to emergency medicine from OB or whatever it may be. And so I think you have a brand new schedule, you have new people you're working around, and then you also may have travel involved. So you may have to find housing and pay for your housing. And so, and then a rotation may cancel last minute. And so then we all get a new rotation for you, but it's last minute and you have to be flexible. So that's the way that the clinical year works. Kit mentioned the opportunity to request rotations. So if you have worked with someone or shadowed somebody and they've said, hey, when you get into PA school, you come on and rotate with me, there will be an opportunity for people to let us in the clinical year know about that. And then we have to vet it. One, does it make sense? Does it fit our requirements for rotations? And then two, can we get an affiliation agreement or a legal contract with that site? And so if we can, typically students are able to go rotate in that particular rotation. And then the other parts of this, we have what we call tracks, and clinical tracks occur when we have multiple rotations within systems. You may still travel, it may not be in Boise or wherever location, Pocatello, but it might be. But you would do multiple rotations within a system. And depending year to year, we may have tracks, and students who are interested in those can put their name in a hat. And literally that is drawn a name for those who are interested. And then the third piece that Kit mentioned is optimization. And it's a software program that we utilize, and we put all of our rotations that we collect availability from for that next year into this program. And students have a few days to go through, look at it, and select preferences. And then the program spits a schedule out for them, usually in June, prior to starting in August. So that's a little bit about the clinical year. Our sites really do vary year to year. As Kit mentioned, most of them are in the Northwest. However, we have outliers. We have Chicago, we've had Iowa, California, Arizona. And so they do vary somewhat, but it gives you a chance usually to have some urban environments and then more rural environments where typically hands-on stuff is a lot more readily available.
Thank you for sharing that. Students in the room, if you don't ask the questions, your advisor is going to do it for you. Does anybody have questions for we have students here who are actually in the program right now. This is a perfect time to ask them what that's like. Okay, I'm going to do it then. The students that are here today from Idaho State University, how has it been as a student attending an institution through a PA program and a pandemic?
It's been, honestly, the program is so organized. It's pretty amazing. We're in groups A and B, and one group can have an option to come to campus on their week, and then the next group will come the next week. Or some people do it all distance, and it's working out really well. Honestly, a lot of my classmates really like it, actually. The only thing I miss out on is like just being really I guess the social aspect.
Yeah, it's hard to compare because like pandemic PA school is the only PA school that we know. But like Andrea was saying, like the A group, B group thing works out really well. We do in fall semester every week you have things. Hopefully you guys don't have to deal with any of this COVID stuff. But fall semester, we did have like a couple things every week that we had to be on campus for, whether they were hands-on like practical skills or our cadaver lab as part of our anatomy class. But for the most part, it has been really seamless. I was really worried about like the remote aspect of ISU's program anyway, with your lecturer not necessarily being on your campus and all of that. That was like a totally new experience for me. But I have been really impressed with how well it works and kind of how, yes, like there are technical difficulties. There are always technical difficulties when technology is involved, but the program and the tech staff, like they get those things resolved so quickly that it's really quite awesome.
Yeah, this is Dave. Maybe I'll give some perspective. Prior to our COVID pandemic, students were required to be in class every day, all day. With COVID coming, now we have students distance. And when COVID first hit, we were totally distant. Everyone was zoomed into the classroom in March and until we finished up the summer semester. And then when this group of students, Megan and Bria and so on, Andrea and Justin, I think, is with us. We had the group A and B and the option to, if it's your group A week, to be in class, or you could choose to be distant, but they're all required to be on campus for labs. In the fall, we had labs of giving injections, drawing blood. We had physical exam skills and physical exam skill testing. And then here in this semester in modules, we have more physical exam skill labs. And then as time goes on, we'll have more labs, suturing, a surgery, scrub gown glove lab, and so on, that the students just have to be present for. And it used to be that we would rotate students to different faculty, but because of COVID, we've changed that, and a certain group of students is assigned to a faculty member, and they just stay with that faculty member. It keeps things kind of small in terms of exposures. How often do you have exams, quizzes? Boy, the students can tell you what it was like in the fall. The modules now, it's essentially one, for the most part, one exam a week on a Monday following a module. Andrea or Bria, or if Judson's with us, do you want to talk about the fun time in the fall with all the,
Yeah.
3 biology courses, 4 PA courses going on? Holy cow.
So a fall semester is it's kind of wild. It's unlike anything I had ever experienced academically before. There were you get to the end of the semester and it's like a light week if you only have 3 exams and a couple quizzes and a couple other assignments due. That being said, a lot of our professors were really good about, if you had a week that was absolutely insane, they would often be willing to move that exam, which is great. But it doesn't do much if, the week on either end is also crazy. But you kind of ease into it and you just get used to it. One plus side is that there isn't time to slack off. You are kind of in it and focused and either studying for, an exam in one class or an exam in the next class, which keeps you really structured and kind of with your nose to the grindstone, so to say.
One thing that's nice is that the syllabus for each class is pretty set, so looking ahead, okay, week 7 is going to be rough, or week 9 is going to be hellish, and you kind of prepare yourself mentally for those and kind of get ahead in some places if you can in that respect.
Yeah, we had a classmate who made this amazing Google Drive spreadsheet. I had it saved on my desktop with the title of the Bible, because it was every assignment and every exam and all of the reading assignments and literally everything that we had to do for the entire fall semester, which was really, really helpful because you could, like Andrew was saying, kind of plan and be okay, here's what I need to deal with from this class for this week, and keep it all on your radar.
There's a couple chat questions or comments. Let me say a couple things. One is about work in the academic year. You saw the number of credits you're taking, and if you're in class Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and you're thinking of all the tests and studying, how reasonable is it to think of working and being successful as a PA student? So it's really not a great idea. And like Antara typed in, for the clinical years, forbidden to work. when you're in the clinical year. There's a question about, are there some students who are in their young 20s that got accepted? The youngest student that I know of that got into PA school was 20, and they turned 21 while in PA school. And I think the oldest person that we've had, I think he was 54 when he got in the PA program. We have many students that are in their 30s, maybe even 40-ish, that decide they're not happy with their career and they make a career change. So that's quite an interesting mix of combination of young folks that just get out of college and they're in their early 20s, and then they've got combined in the classroom their fellow students that are 30, 40, maybe even 50. Pretty neat mix.
So we have a hand up from Luis, and then we have a question in the chat. So I'll ask the question in the chat in a second, but Luis, you've had your hand up for a little while. So do you have a specific question you want to ask?
Yeah, this is for the PA students. I just wanted to know what made you guys decide PA over medical school?
That's like the $1 million question. So when I was in my undergrad, I originally wanted to go to medical school. And for me, what kind of led me to decide that PA school was a better fit for me was kind of like multifactorial. I had a couple close friends who went through the application process for medical school, and watching them do that, I was like, this has drained like every ounce of joy out of their lives, which like I wasn't all that excited about, but would have been willing to do. But then I ended up working with a PA and being able to see him and the way that he worked collaboratively with his supervising physician and the autonomy that he had, and like all of these like PA buzzwords that you hear, like they were all true and there, and seeing that as well as just the quality of life of getting to do 2 years of school and then go right into clinical practice, I think is like pretty incredible. And for me, that was definitely a draw towards PA school. A lot of people I feel like also consider like the nurse practitioner route. For me, I am really interested in like a more surgically oriented specialty, which the PA field caters to really well, and you have a lot of options there. So all of those kind of contributed. I didn't really want to be in school for like, the next 20 years, or it's not 20, I know that, but long amount of time.
I'm a career switcher, so it made more sense logistically, like, because I'd already completed my bachelor's degree and kind of having to go back for a lot more undergrad work and that kind of thing. But other than that, though, I've met plenty of really awesome doctors, but it just seemed like the PAs I met were just always really down to earth, but so incredibly smart, and their patients were always just I don't know, so comfortable with them. It just seemed like a better fit for kind of my aim and what I wanted for my scope of practice.
Anybody else? All right. So the question we had in the chat was, when you are traveling during your clinical year, how much advancement do you get to receive before your next rotation? So do you know how far in advance do you know when you're rotating and where you're going?
Sure. So our goal as a program is to get a first schedule out in June. And I think Andrea and Bria and everybody that's in the program has already heard us say, you'll get that rotation and that schedule in June, and it likely will not be filled. If it's filled, I like to tell people something will cancel the next year, because life happens to our preceptors. And so I would say people have everywhere from 3 maybe to 7, sometimes 8 if we're lucky, rotations filled at that point. It's variable year to year. So we like to have notice. You know the calendar dates of your rotations when you first enter the program. So we give those out. But in terms of, you know, maybe your rotation is unfilled until a certain date, maybe it was canceled and we had to refill it. It really could be the week before. That happens all the time. We've never had a student not have a rotation, so that's never happened. But we understand it can be stressful for students going, oh gosh, now you filled this and I have to go to Bonners Ferry, Idaho up north in a week and I have to find housing or whatever it may be. And so that's where sometimes that stress of the clinical year comes in. But overall, it's a year in length. I give Dave Martin a hard time about this, but I like to think that we're in the fun part of the PA program. So our students in general really enjoy it because they're actually out and working with patients and applying all that great knowledge that Dave and the team give them in the first year. So it's a fun year. It goes by fast. And even though there's some bumps in the road, people get through it and love it.
Have a captive audience, students.
So I see a clinical.
Go ahead.
I think I see a clinical year question on housing. In general, for the didactic year, students are on their own for their housing. Clinical year, in general, you're responsible to find your housing. We do have a few sites that either are very cost prohibitive in terms of in terms of the cost for 5 weeks or just availability. And so there are some sites where either the hospital or clinic or sometimes the program will help students. But outside of that, the student is responsible for housing.
We had a question about, did any of the students complete volunteer working and shadowing hours in undergrad, or did you wait until after graduation? That's a great question.
I did a little bit during my undergrad. I took my EMT and my wilderness first responder as an undergrad. And so through that, had some like ER shadowing exposure, and then worked guiding like climbing and hiking and ski trips. And so with that, was able to kind of use those wilderness first responder and sorry, my brain's a little fried, EMT skills, which was great. I'm really good at taping ankles and putting on Band-Aids. But otherwise, most of my like clinical experience and volunteering and shadowing came after I graduated. I did quite a bit of shadowing in like my first year after graduating. And then after that, moved into a medical assistant role, which I did for, I guess, until I got into PA school. I would highly, I know that the program doesn't require like clinical experience. If you're in a place where you can get it, I would totally recommend it because it's really amazing having that background knowledge. Like I was most recently in a dermatology clinic, and like this week in lecture, we've been talking a lot about different like dermatological conditions that relate to allergies. And it's really nice to just like already kind of have that information in my back pocket and like not necessarily have to worry about learning that stuff from scratch. And it's really cool having classmates who, worked in busy emergency departments or worked with hand surgeons and did all of these cool things and getting like their little tips and tricks and insight. So if you have the ability and the time and the opportunity, I would totally recommend it. Because it's just going to help you be a better PA when the time comes and maybe relieve like a little bit of PA school stress when you're in the heat of it.
I'd chime in just as a faculty to that and say students have an easier time in the first year, but also in the second year. Even if they worked as a reception or billing, any experience where you've had in a clinic that you just kind of have the lingo and have the understanding it is really helpful. And I also think personally, shadowing different provider types. So I know there's a question in the chat regarding NP versus PA. And that shadowing gives you that opportunity. Like what do you see as differences? Are there things that you like better about the MD or DO route versus PA or nurse practitioner route? And so although we can talk about differences, and I can throw that in a second, but I think the shadowing allows you to get some of that information and information how the teams work in different settings. So Bria talked about wilderness versus ER. Maybe it's psych versus family medicine. It allows you to really explore some of those things.
Do we want to touch on a little bit about what the difference between PA or NP is?
Sure. I think everybody can chime in, and Dave, you can too. I think in my perspective, an APRN or an NP, there's different type of APRNs, began as an RN, so nursing school first. And then the APRN program or NP program typically follows a nursing model instead of the medical model, which PA would follow. A lot of the nurse practitioner programs are DNP now, so a doctorate degree, and vary in length, but tend to be a little bit longer. And most are specialized. So ISU has a doctorate nurse practitioner in psychiatry. I know BSU has the gerontology. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've met some of the folks from there. So they tend to be more specialized. What we do in practice, depending on the state, can look very similar. And so in Idaho, nurse practitioners can be completely independent, no supervising physician or collaborating physician. They can own their own practice. PAs can also own their own practice, but you have to have that agreement, that supervising physician. And in reality, in a lot of the systems, hospital systems, clinic systems, if you take an NP or an APRN and a PA, they function very similarly and sometimes have the same oversight requirements like within the hospital of each other. So in Idaho, we can prescribe, both can prescribe controlled medications as well as other medications. That's not the same in every single state. So it really depends on the state that you're looking for. But in general, I would say it's a different model of education. And then currently there's still more specialization within the NP programs.
Thank you. So we have a question about what has been the most difficult class to complete in PA school and what has been the most exciting? That's a great question.
I would say actually, like, okay, I really liked pathophysiology. That class was really exciting and we had an amazing teacher and he was, I just really liked him. But I think the hardest, but also most exciting was anatomy. Most exciting because we have the lab with the donors. Most difficult because the structures lists are incredibly long and you have to be in the lab kind of hands-on studying if you want to be able to remember what it is come time for your practical exam. So same for both.
So I wouldn't say that any of our classes have been easy. So picking out one that's been the most difficult is definitely challenging. I think I agree with anatomy, just because, I mean, between lecture and lab, like it is so much. Like if you guys have taken anatomy and physiology in your undergrad, you know, for me, it was 2 semesters. But now like do all of that in 15 weeks and then add like a infinitely more in-depth cadaver lab than like what my undergrad one was. So that class took it took a lot of time and it was very hard and it was stressful. But I mean, it was super rewarding, and like getting to work with the donors is such a cool opportunity, especially if you haven't done that yet. It's really, really awesome. And then the most exciting, pathophysiology, like Andrea mentioned, is an amazing class. It is super cool. I think that what I've been the most excited about was probably our pharmacology class. I just think that pharm is super interesting, and the way that drugs, work on the body and work in relation to each other is really cool. So that's been great. And then everything this semester I feel like is exciting because it's all much more like practicing medicine oriented, which is really cool to get to apply like all of the hard work and knowledge and stuff that we learned last semester and kind of see it in action.
Thank you. So these students in their undergraduate may or may not have thought about what it's like to really manage time and manage stress and balance. What kinds of things do you do as students to manage your time, your stress, and your balance?
That's a really great question. So in terms of managing time, I have a planner, which is in the other room right now, that has like every detail of my life written out, like fully scheduled. I also keep it all on my like iCal, so it's on my laptop, my iPad, and my phone, like essentially everything I have going on every day. I like to sit down every Sunday, what the week's going to look like, and kind of structure my structure my studying from there. I also meal prep on Sundays, which is like never a thing I ever thought I would do, but I like plan out what I'm going to eat for the entire week. I think that kind of helps with balance too, because then I don't make those like super stressed, anxious, like poor food decisions, which I'm definitely prone to. And then I like make as much as I can. And then once the week gets crazy, I don't have to think about it. In terms of, I kind of guess it ties into like managing stress and time management and like well-being. I schedule like my time to exercise every week and into the weekends. And then I meditate every day, and that is huge. And like, if you don't have a meditation practice, I would highly recommend dabbling or considering it, because I think that for me, that's been, I don't want to say crutch, but it's been like a really big aid in dealing with the stress, because I mean, PA school is stressful. A second year student told us like in our first week of, I guess it was one of our orientation things, to like not forget that life goes on outside of PA school and to try and remember that, which is super helpful. And just like remembering to take time to like do the things that you love and to see friends and family, which is kind of weird in COVID times, but in non-COVID times. And to like have a night where you like sit on the couch and watch a movie and like don't think about pathophysiology or your exam that's coming up in 3 days. Yeah, so hopefully some of that helps.
Andrea?
Yeah, I don't meal plan, but like I'll kind of like get easy stuff that I just can grab from the fridge. And that's actually one thing about distance learning that's really awesome, is that like you don't have to worry so much about packing your lunch. But yeah, and then Lewis had asked if we get 8 hours of sleep, and I would honestly say yes, because I feel like most of us realize like that if you don't plan your time for like your week, and you're trying to cram the night before or something like before a test, like your brain just stops working past, like, I don't know, for me it's like 10. I just can't. So and I've talked with Bria about this too, like just the importance of sleep, and a lot of us actually in our cohort really like value sleep and kind of like make it a priority, because we feel like we're gonna be better students if we actually can get good sleep.
I'd say for the clinical year students, again, it varies on your rotation. So we have students in family medicine that may work, 8 to 5 or 6 and have a pretty normal night, and not have to study quite as much as our didactic year students. But then they may go to ER and they may have to work 4 night shifts in a row or a 24-hour shift, and then turn around and work a day shift the next week. And then we may have students in surgery rotations that are working RMAX, which is 80 hours a week, which is your preceptor's time. That may include call, so you may get called in the middle of the night. So clinical year, there's maybe a little less time studying, but rotations can vary pretty widely from regular business hours to far more than that.
We also had a question about what the typical day of class looks like. How many classes do you have a day? You know, are you there every day of the week? Even though I know that in pandemic world, you guys are Zooming, what does that look like for you? Maybe you might add also, what is the studying after work? You know, how does that, you know, combine with, you know, not just your in-course time, but your study time too?
So one thing that I have really enjoyed about the program is that like day to day, your class schedule looks different. So it's not like every day you sit down and have the exact same schedule. Fall semester, we were in class from 9 to 5 almost every day, with that Spanish class happening from 8 to 9 a couple days. And then this semester, it's 9 to 5 is the standard, or 8 to 5 is the standard. That being said, you do have like the random afternoon here or there where you get out early, which is always lovely. But in terms of like what class you have, or what classes or professors you have in that, you know, 8 to 5 time range, it varies day to day, which is awesome. Like variety is great, especially when you're going to school 5 days a week, which we are most of the time. We have a couple like 3-day weekends this semester with holidays, which just feel like the biggest treat. And then in terms of studying, I think it varies a lot from student to student. For me, I typically take like, you know, a half hour, 45-minute break when we're done with class at the end of the day, just to like decompress. And then I'll study until dinner time. And then I try to be done with like most of my studying by like 8:30, and then I'll get all of my stuff ready for the next day. I try to be in bed by 9. I'm not a night person. And then I always read through like whatever important notes I had from that day before bed, so I can be asleep by like 9:30. I get up at 5 and I do most of my studying in the morning, as well as like exercise stuff. And that's like a schedule that works for me. I have friends who sleep till 5 minutes before class and then hop on Zoom in their pajamas and then, you know, stay up till midnight and do their studying at that time. But I think it's just figuring out like what works for you and, you know, kind of going with that.
I have to be super efficient. I have babies. So when and I co-parent. So when they're with their dad, I get a lot more studying done. When they're not, I'll usually wake up before class, and then I try to be super efficient that like download the PowerPoints beforehand, kind of look over stuff, maybe watch a few osmosis videos, a few YouTube videos about what's going to be on lecture, just to kind of like prime. So it's not the first time I'm seeing it. So I feel like that really helps me be efficient. And then I'll kind of study some Quizlets and stuff like that.
Great, thank you. So we have a question about what is one piece of advice you would give these beautiful pre-PA students?
This is Dave. One thing I'd say is getting into PA school is not kind of like, you know, I think I'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work out, I'll do something different. If you apply to PA school and want to come to PA school, you need to know you're full on, fully committed. This is absolutely the path that you want. So that's where getting yourself into some shadowing, some medical experience or whatever, so that you know absolutely this is where you want to be. This is not like jumping stone to something else typically.
So I'm probably going to give more than one because I think there's a lot. One is I would say like don't be in a rush. Like don't be afraid to like live a life after your undergrad and before PA school, because like the travel and the clinical experience and even if it's like retail experience, like all of it is just going to like help prepare you for either like PA school or for like being a PA, or just like, you know, being like a better human being, which is I think ultimately the goal. And with that, I would say like learn as much as you can from as many providers as you can. Like I am so grateful every day for like the providers that I've been able to like work with and learn from. One of them texted me this morning and was like, hey, like on the way to the clinic, like we're thinking about you, like hope it's going well. And I was like, yeah, like by the way, have you like ever seen this, you know, crazy skin disease in person? And he like responded with this awesome case story. And just like having those connections and having that knowledge and like that support is like, one, helpful as a student, but two, it's this amazing like reminder of why you want to do what you want to do. Because like PA school is hard and it's easy to like not be able to see the forest through the trees or the trees through the forest. But like having that reminder of like, yeah, like that's the goal is very helpful.
Those are all really awesome. I don't have anything wise or profound to add, except for maybe that the pre-PA process is really stressful. I still have my little paper that Erin wrote me actually. So I went to her office and was like, I want to go to PA school. She's like, oh my gosh, like, cause I was a music teacher, and she's like, you have a lot of work to do. And so she wrote out this like paper and it was like, okay, this month you have to do this. This month you have to do this. And I followed it to a T. I like did it. And then I got here and it was super stressful, but now that I'm here, I will say that it's amazing to get over that period, because it's kind of intense and crazy. Just, you know, the file score and making sure everything's just lined up right in your CASPA and all of that. So, you know, kind of like plan to be meticulous about that, but know that it's a nice, I guess, breath of fresh air once you walk into the classroom and you're here and you're a PA student.
I think from my perspective, I actually did have someone in my PA class who left after the first year and went to medical school and then became an anesthesiologist. And we all thought, wow, how could you retake all of these classes yet again and do this all again and then go on and on and on. So he made it work and he's doing fine. I just talked to him about a week ago, but I agree. Really find out what it is you like. And if it's PA, take the time to make sure that that's what you're interested in. And then, you know, jump in, do everything you can, and then take a break. If you get some interviews, you know, take a break before you start, so you don't burn out. And then the other thing is perseverance. Not everybody gets in their first attempt, and it's really important that it's common second, third time applying to get in. And so don't give up if you don't get in that first or second time even.
Sorry. We have what we call the tornado in this household. The kids have arrived, and so I'm trying to get them to quiet down so I can talk. So thank you for that. Do we have any final left questions? Do we have one final question? It's about 4:29 right now. And I was late to the ball game, so is there a final question? That was actually a pretty good final question, by the way.
I'm just going to type my email address. People are always welcome to contact us. We used to let people come and hang out and visit, but obviously COVID, we can't do that right now, but I'll put my email again if anybody wants to contact me.
And then if any of the students are willing to do that, we would love that. I know, Andrea, I know when you were working with me, I would love to have you do an alumni spotlight with us. I can send you my stuff to do that, to be able to kind of showcase for students, well, gosh, this is how she did it. I think those are great beneficial opportunities. So if you're willing and able, that would be wonderful. And especially now with COVID, I'm really trying to encourage students to try anything, informational interviews, virtual shadowing, any of those things are, you know, even a conversation with one of these students. Yes, they're students right now, but they're in it right now. They're going to be clinically rotating the following year. And so having that knowledge base is huge. So I want to send a huge thank you to Idaho State University, your staff, your team, all the students who came. I know you've got busy schedules, and so I appreciate your time. I will stick around and let everybody kind of filter out. And so if you have a particular question you want to ask real quick, you can certainly do that. Thank you all for coming. I hope this was beneficial. And yeah, Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.